Welcome back to the vlog. A vlog coming to you today from inside my lounge, and that's because Auckland is in the middle of a weather bomb. We've had absolutely crap weather pretty much since December last year, continued right through summer, now it's in autumn, still crap. So I brought the bikes inside, going to do the vlog in here today, hope I don't get in trouble for bringing bikes into the lounge. Today's vlog, I'm looking at my gravel bike, which hasn't been on the channel before, and my mountain bike. I've seen a lot of stuff popping up online lately about if you need both of them, one or the other. So I'm going to go through, compare the two, look at the differences and when each of them is suited to riding. So if you have any comments, if you have any thoughts, drop them below in the comments. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. That helps the channel out a lot too. Hope you enjoy it. So first up is the Scott Spark RC900 team. You've seen this bike on the channel before. I did a rig rundown on this a couple of weeks ago. It was a full carbon, full suspension cross-country bike with a 1x12 electronic group set from SRAM and remote lockout for the front and rear shocks so that you can completely lock them out and ride it like a hardtail. You can even lock out the front so it rides like a real old school mountain bike with no shocks at all. Over here on the left, which hasn't featured on the channel before, is my Cube Nuroad Pro C62. This is a full carbon gravel bike. It's got a 1x Shimano GRX group set on it. Mechanical, because I couldn't afford electronic. Disc brakes, and then of course we've got the negative split Host full carbon gravel wheel set. So 700C wheels, pretty much the same size as the 29s on the Scott Spark, but with narrower tyres. So we've got the Schwalbe G1s on there, which I think are 40mm, and pretty much looks like a road bike. So obviously it's not, the geometry is a little bit different, but looks a lot more like a road bike than a cross-country bike. So this bike's sort of become a bit of a Swiss Army knife for me, bit of a go-to. I've commuted on it, sort of like my ride down to the shops bike, go for a little blat somewhere. And it's because when it's a gravel bike, you can sort of take it on most terrain up to single trail. So it wouldn't handle single trail well. That's just because there's not enough grip on the tires and also no suspension. So it'd be a real uncomfortable ride. The caveat to that is I know Canyon have brought out a few new gravel models with a small suspension travel on the front. So that's just to make it handle a few more roads and be a bit more comfortable on some trails. Probably the main thing I don't love about this bike is how wide these bars are. Because I do most of my riding on my road bike, which have that's got 420mm bars, I get on this bike which these bars are 460mm at the hoods, and then they flare outwards to 500mm at the bottom of the drops. Because I do so much mileage on my road bike, I'm just really used to that setup. When I get on this bike, it feels a little bit like I'm driving a bus. So it's really good, but I do want to change these bars out for something narrower, just so it feels a little bit more familiar. Aside from that, really comfortable bike. It's a nice frame, it's pretty light, and the 1x is great. So when we compare the two bikes, pretty obvious difference in appearance straight away. The cross-country bike looks pretty conventional, like cross-country bikes have looked for a long time. Flat bars and then a frame built to fit suspension and wide knobbly tyres to hit all the terrain. Gravel bike, this is quite a big sort of growth space in cycling, so they haven't been around forever. Obviously cyclocross has sort of been a thing for a while, but that was just putting chunky tyres onto road bikes. So gravel bikes are sort of made with bike packing in mind, so you have extra mounts, things like this, and this where you can add luggage, add more drink holders, go bike packing, load up for a multi-day trip and take all sorts of things with you. And then you've got drop bars just like on a road bike. Now, I really like the drop bar setup on the gravel bike, and that's just because there's more positions to put your hands in. So for a long ride, it's quite easy to find a comfortable spot. For descending, you've got really good control here. You can reach the brakes from either position. You can just chuck your hands on the top if you feel like relaxing a bit, or if you're climbing. It's a really nice setup. It's really comfortable, and I've sort of set this up to a similar geometry to my road bike. So spacing wise, it doesn't feel too different aside from the extra wide bars. So when it comes to terrain, that's what really separates the bikes and what they can ride. Gravel bike I can ride on the road, on gravel, on some dirt, some grass. As soon as you get into single trail, real slippery stuff, or big chunky gravel, or really rough tracks, that's the wrong bike for the job, and that's where you want a cross-country bike. You can take this thing over some pretty decent jumps, take it down some steep hills, ride it over tree roots, through clay, through streams, over rocks, and you've got a lot more traction, and it's just a more plush, forgiving ride, courtesy of the suspension. On the flip side, this bike's faster. For riding on the road, for riding on the gravel, because you've got tyres that give you less rolling resistance than these knobbly tyres, you can ride it faster. So you will be able to cover more mileage on a gravel bike, as long as the mileage isn't on some really, really rutted, horrible tracks. So that's the difference between the two. Something like Otago Rail Trail, this would be perfect. Something a bit gruntier like the Timber Trail, you might want to go for something like this. So I wanted to touch on comfort as well. I've sort of already mentioned how this fits nicely, which sort of comes down to ergonomics. As far as riding on rough terrain, this is a more comfortable bike, and that's because it's got suspension built into it, which smooths everything out and makes it really nice. As far as gearing goes, the bikes are pretty similar, both on a 1x setup. The mountain bike's obviously got a bigger range, much bigger, large cog here on the back. Gravel bike still climbs pretty comfortably, but I find quite often if I'm riding on the road to a gravel section, or if I come out onto a smooth section, I run out of gears on this bike pretty quickly. So once you sort of get up into the 30km/h plus, tend to find I'm spinning my legs out a bit too much and just have to stop pedaling or soft pedal a little bit. But it's kind of the trade-offs. Where it gets interesting is when I think about the lockout on this bike. So when that's locked out, this bike rides like a hardtail mountain bike. It actually rides a lot like this bike, just with different ergonomics and knobbly tyres. So does that make this the more all-purpose bike? Yes, it'll be slower on the road because of the knobbly tyres and also because of the gearing. But on an off-road ride or a long ride, a multi-day ride where you're going to be coming across all sorts of different terrains, I almost wonder if this is the better suited bike, because I can almost change it from an XC bike into a gravel bike just by hitting that button. So I've seen a lot of commentary online lately about, do you need a gravel bike if you've got a mountain bike? Are gravel bikes replacing hardtails? Are hardtails replacing gravel bikes? Or do you just need one of each? I don't really know. Quite often if I'm just going on a sort of cruisy ride, not a hard out cross country ride and not a race, I end up tossing up on which bike to take, because it's a bit of a blurry line between which bike is the better bike for the job depending on the trail. So it's an interesting discussion point. I'd love to know what you think. Please leave your comments beneath this video. It's a really interesting discussion to have, to see which bike you have or which you would prefer. Let me know what you think. Gravel bike, cross-country bike, or do I need to get a hardtail as well? I don't really know if I have room for another bike. I hope you enjoyed the video. I look forward to reading your comments. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Please like this video, helps us out a lot. And hopefully in the next vlog, we'll be back to regular programming and back outside. Thank you for watching.